Harden, here's his contract situation. He didn't take the extension. He has a player option for this summer at $47.4 million. So what he could do was opt in and then take a 4-year extension on top of that for $223 million. So he'd be looking at a new deal at $270 million. He'd be turning 33 in August. And that would mean that Harden at his age 37-year-old season would be making just under $62 million a year. Now, that sounds like a scary number. If you're a longtime listener, don't worry. The cap goes up. The cap will be based on the new TV rights. The TV rights prior to the last time the cap went up, they were at $930 million collectively. Between Turner and ESPN on the last deal, they paid $24 billion, and people laughed about that deal. And that deal turned out to be a bargain, more than a bargain, really, if you think about what the projections are for the next TV deal. Because the TV deal, the numbers that are out there, it says $75 billion. I mean, you can go out and kind of project any number you want. Here's what we know. It's going to go up, and it's going to go up significantly. And if just the TV number doubles in this case, we're talking about another massive bump. I mean, granted, that last bump was absurd when you're going from $930 million to $24 billion. But you could ask yourself the question, if you were the Sixers, do I actually want James Harden at $62 million at 37 years old? I mean, the quickest answer on that part of it is probably no. It's the worst shooting season of his career right now. We've seen him kind of just bail on two teams the last two times around. Maybe it's that he's still hurt because they haven't played all that well lately. But I think the NBA operates with this understanding on some of these back-end deals. We'll just trade him for somebody else. And you can sit there and say it's impossible. All of these guys end up getting traded. The number of times that we've said a player can't be traded because of how bad the contract is at the back end of the years, those guys always end up getting traded at some point. I think that's especially what a Daryl Morey would do. He'd go, all right, you know what I have is I have a zero asset right now, zero return on this one asset that I have. And if I add Harden, who maybe has a 2-year window of being still an elite player, and that's really up to you what you think of Harden, the player that we've seen right now, because it hasn't felt real elite-y this season. But I could understand a team saying, all right, everybody's there. He knows exactly what the role is. We're going to let him do his thing. He's going to play off of Embiid. It's going to be perfect, even though defensively he's a mess. Maybe we can cover it up with all the other defensive players we have. And now we have a real shot at this because we feel like the top of the East is weakened because Milwaukee hasn't quite rolled through people like we thought. Brooklyn's had their issues. Atlanta's felt like, even though they've been playing better, they're not taking a step forward off of where they were last year, right? We're talking all of this out, and you're going, hey, with Embiid and a Harden, it's better than this disaster we have right now, despite the fact the Sixers are playing well. And now we have maybe a 2 to 3-ish year window of really competing and getting out of the East. That would be the Philadelphia side of it. Now, on the Brooklyn side of it, you could say, well, we got to make sure Durant's cool with all this, right? We still don't know what to do with Kyrie. But if we had Simmons and we have Kyrie back, and Joe Harris not being there is a big problem, but now there's no pressure on Simmons, the basketball player. I am not a Ben Simmons fan. I think to use mental health, even though I'm sure this hasn't been a great time for him, to use mental health as what felt like a last resort on getting your way and getting out of having to play. And then the article from Ramona Shelburne, where I just felt like, okay, so this is just, hey, and Embiid did this, but I didn't do this. It just, I don't know. I'm surprised that was the kind of information, like good for her for getting the information. I'm surprised the team around the Ben Simmons side of the argument would want that information out there as if that was going to get any of us that are paying attention or have any like 1% NBA intelligence would go, hey, great point. That is a great point that you didn't get mad at him in 2019 when they lost to the Raptors and Embiid struggled to shoot the way Simmons felt like people, specifically Embiid, had turned on him after the Atlanta series. I don't love Ben Simmons, the basketball player, when I know that you're not comfortable out there in the biggest moments. All right, maybe that does go away a little bit, but it scares the hell out of me. In Brooklyn, he doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff. Play defense, play center, and you're going to be diving into the hoop on some of the help that comes towards us if we have shooting around you, where your life is going to be so much easier. All right? That's going to happen. So from a basketball standpoint, he's younger. You don't feel like, even though he's bailed on the team this year, he bailed specifically to his situation where, Harden just looks like a disinterested player for very long stretches. And I don't know how you do that throughout an entire regular season, expect to just pick it right back up in the playoffs. So when it comes to the actual negotiation part of it, who says what? I know what Daryl's going to say. He's going to say, hey, we're giving you the better player. He's younger. He's cheaper. We have to do the Harden extension. he hasn't played all that well. It hasn't really worked out. He's coming off the injury. You're actually trying to diminish the value that you want, right? Then, of course, the other part of it, you'd say, why do you want him then, right? Here's where the conversation should stop. Brooklyn should say this. Our guy still plays. Your guy doesn't. All right? Our guy plays. He's here. Yours isn't. Yours isn't going to play this season, and he's never going to play for you again. So you have to give us a little bit more. And I would think that would kind of, whatever the contractual obligations end up being down the road, whatever those are, and they are significant for anyone acquiring Harden, I don't know that there's a great counter to that. Like, your guy's not playing. Well, I'm sure you're going to try to come up with something if you're Daryl Morey, but it doesn't work. Now the Nets, they've lost 8 straight. They're the 7th seed. And I've seen a lot of this like, hey, look how close they are to being in the play-in game. You know what? They're also 4.5 games out of the number 1 seed. The top of the East is all jacked up right now. Everybody's right there. When I look at the Brooklyn part of it, because there are some victory laps, because people, they don't like when these kinds of teams are put together, even though I think everybody was picking them coming out of the East, considering how close they got last year with just Durant in play towards the end. Them only being 4.5 out of the first and knowing Durant is coming back, and if Durant is back and healthy, it looked like he was on his way to an MVP type season, not to guarantee it because Embiid and Jokic are at another level right now for them. I'm not going to just write off the Nets because I'm like, all right, yeah, it sucks. And Joe Harris, and you don't like the bench, and they're a little short. Kyrie and Hart. Okay, yeah, but is Durant coming back? Okay, well, he is. Fine. So I don't want to hear about him being a 7th seed right now because it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. The weirdest thing would be a Nets Raptors series at some point because of Toronto's rules for Kyrie. Like, imagine if that's the first round. It could happen. I mean, there could be a Raptors Nets series at some point. So then you go, how's that going to play out with no Kyrie? And as I've said before, we know what's going to happen if nothing changes where Kyrie's not playing in home games for the Nets. I still don't think we've really factored in how weird it's going to be. What if they end up with home court? What if they're in a 7-game series with a team in the second round or the Eastern Conference Finals and Kyrie's not playing? I think this whole conversation is going to get cranked up again. So I don't know if that deal is going to happen for this week. I could totally see the Nets saying, hey, let's just keep this group together. As messed up as it's been, it hasn't gone according to plan. Everybody would do this if they had the chance to do it by putting these guys together. Let's just see what happens because we're not really afraid of anyone in the East, and we know we're getting Durant back. And if we want to revisit it, we know that deal will probably still be there for us this summer unless they have some kind of other intel that Simmons could be heading somewhere else before Thursday's deadline. But based on all the information we've heard privately and publicly, that's not really been the case.